respect to the U.S. um,
Yes.
warning and Vladimir Putin brushing that warning off, do you think that that is an indication of how far the trust has is
Oh,
waiting
yeah.
between the U.S. Or is it just a bit of um bravado? So that's so interesting that there was never any reaction to this,
Hmm.
warning by the US.
Yes. And I think it's a little bit of both. I think primarily it's lack of trust. But there is also, as you mentioned, that sort of bravado and the macho-like image that Putin likes to portray, not only abroad, but I would say especially at home. And he's been doing that for many years, and that has become one of his signatures. And for him to actually admit that another country, especially a country that he considers to be one of its adversaries, the United States, they knew what was going to happen in Moscow. They got the signal first. They gave Moscow the warning. It's very, very embarrassing for the Putin regime and for him to admit that they knew first. And he didn't even know what was being plotted in his own backyard, quite literally in his own backyard. So this is the sort of this embarrassment factor. But also what is very interesting about this attack, and obviously there is so much that we still don't know about the actual attack. What we can talk about with a lot more, I think, conviction and more facts at hand are the responses, particularly the Russian response. What was very apparent within just minutes of the news breaking on Friday night, Moscow time, was that Russia would do what they could, the Russian authorities, that is, to blame Ukraine, to implicate Ukraine under any circumstances, no matter how flimsy the evidence was going to be. And the evidence was very, very weak. But nonetheless, that was the first go-to. It's sort of become this first go-to, and obviously it's always peppered with there's a Western hand in there somewhere. And we talked last time about how Russia sort of views all of the West as the collective West, and primarily they really talk about the United States, very often the UK, and then the rest of Western Europe. So it's almost become this sort of paranoia, right? So blame everything on Ukraine, but also don't just say that it's all of Ukraine's doing, because that's giving a lot of credence, a lot of power to Ukraine to be able to pull it off on its own. So let's just make sure that we mention that they were supported, if not encouraged, by, in this instance, the United States, but he still talked about it broadly as the West. So that was sort of backpedaled a lot faster than I thought it was going to be. I thought, to be honest, that they would keep pushing this Ukraine narrative until the end of time, until it was just going to become absolutely ridiculous, given no evidence as such to be able to back it up with. And obviously, not just the United States and other Western countries essentially talking about this terrorist attack and giving quite a lot of convincing statements, if not evidence of it being ISIS-K, but ISIS-K coming out with what seemed as very credible evidence, including body camera footage that we saw filmed the night of the attack. And we're watching everything unfold in sort of POV mode. And that was rather convincing. And it was going to be very hard for Putin to keep just talking about Ukraine and completely ignore the ISIS-K connection. And today, more specifically tonight, Moscow time, he finally came out and said that, yes, we now know that the attack was essentially, it was the ISIS-K that was in charge of going out there and committing the attack, but at the orders of what he likes to call the Kiev regime, the Ukrainian government. And that's very interesting because he still has not let go of his, I think, not just him trying to pin the blame on Ukraine, but at this point it's come to sort of this, I've come to a realization that he truly believes that Ukraine is involved in anything and everything against Russia. And it'll be very interesting to see whether the Ukrainian angle starts to die down a little bit and we see more and more prominent accusations and prominent statements from the Russian side talking about ISIS-K being the perpetrator without anyone else supporting them. This was what they're doing. It had nothing to do with Ukraine, nothing to do with the United States and other Western allies.